Hello and welcome to Hope After. This is a Christ-centered journey towards healing in marriage and a space for couples walking through the impact of hidden pornography. And everything we share comes from lived experience because we've walked this road ourselves. And what we offer has been shaped through the healing and rebuilding that God has led us through. As Scripture reminds us, God restores what's been broken, and we're called to walk with others as that restoration unfolds. So this isn't theory, it's truth lived out and shared carefully with you. Today's episode is about a very difficult question. How do I support my husband with his porn addiction when I'm still hurting? Because this is where many wives find themselves. You may have discovered pornography use recently, or you may have known about it for years. You might be living in the shock of discovery, or you may be exhausted from repeated promises, repeated apologies, repeated relapses, and repeated heartbreak. Somewhere in the middle of your own pain, you may also feel pressure from him, from church culture, from marriage advice, from your own faith, from your own compassion to support him, to be kind, to be understanding, to help him and encourage him, to forgive him, to not make things worse, to not shame him or abandon him. And that can create a very painful conflict inside, because part of you may want him to get well. Part of you may still love him. Part of you may want the marriage to recover, but another part of you may feel devastated, angry, numb, confused, disgusted, frightened, exhausted, suspicious, deeply hurt. So today I want to speak into that tension gently and clearly, because supporting your husband must never mean abandoning yourself. When pornography is discovered in a marriage, the wife often finds herself in a position she never chose. She's been wounded by the very behaviour she is then expected to help him to recover from. That's a lot. It's not the same as supporting someone through an illness that has not directly betrayed you. It's not the same as supporting someone through a struggle that has not damaged trust, sexual safety, honesty, body image, and emotional security. Pornography in marriage is not just his private battle when it's affected the covenant, the bedroom, the secrecy, your confidence, the truthfulness, and the safety of the relationship. So when a wife is asked directly or indirectly to support him, she may feel torn. She may think, I want him to get free, but I'm still furious. Or I want to help, but I just don't trust him. Or I want to be compassionate, but I'm just feeling broken. I want our marriage to heal, but I cannot carry his recovery. I don't want to shame him, but I also don't want to pretend this hasn't destroyed me. I don't know how to be loving without losing myself. And if this is where you are, I want to say this very clearly. That conflict makes sense. You're not cold because you're struggling to support him. You're not unforgiving because you still have questions. You're not cruel because you need boundaries. You're not unchristian because you cannot simply become his cheerleader while your own heart is bleeding. I think it's one of the hardest places for a wife to be, because you have that sympathy for the addiction side of it, but you're also the person who has been hurt by it. And husbands can sometimes underestimate that. They may want support and encouragement and reassurance that they're not a terrible person, but you're also trying to survive the impact of what has happened. And if you're expected to help him recover before anyone has really cared for your wound, that can feel like another injustice. It's almost like he's saying, please help me feel better about the thing that devastated you. And that's rather a big ask. Yes, the husband needs support, but you cannot be the only place that he gets it from. Support doesn't mean responsibility. It's one of the most important distinctions that I can make. You can support someone without becoming responsible for them. Support might mean you're willing to have honest conversations. Responsibility means you're expected to manage his behaviour. Support might mean you encourage him to seek proper help. Responsibility means you're the one researching everything, setting everything up, checking everything, chasing everything, and carrying the fear of whether he follows through. Support might mean you're honest about what helps you feel safer. Responsibility means you become the monitor of his devices, his mood, his temptations, his internet use, his honesty, and his recovery. Support might mean you acknowledge genuine effort when you see consistent change. Responsibility means that you have to keep him motivated so he doesn't relapse. That's not support, that's burden. And many wives find themselves carrying it without realizing. They become detective, counsellor, accountability partner, emotional manager, spiritual encourager, sexual reassurance provider, and crisis responder. But a wife cannot heal if she's also been asked to manage the very thing that wounded her. His recovery must belong to him. That doesn't mean he walks alone. It means he must take ownership. He needs to seek accountability that's not dependent on you. He needs to be honest without being forced. He needs to bring things into the light without waiting to be caught. He needs to learn what drives the behaviour. He needs to take practical steps with devices, habits, stress, secrecy, and temptation. He needs to pursue recovery because it's right, not because you're watching. You can support recovery, but you cannot be the recovery plan. Many wives feel guilty for not being more supportive, and that guilt can come from many places. It might come from compassion. You see his shame, you see his distress, you see how he hates what he's done, and you see his tears, and part of you wants to comfort him. It might come from faith. You believe in forgiveness, grace, redemption, and restoration, so you don't want to harden your heart. It might come from fear. You worry that if you're too hurt, too angry, or too boundaried, he will relapse, withdraw, give up, or blame you. It might come from past patterns. Maybe you've always been the emotional fixer in the relationship. Maybe you're used to managing other people's pain before your own. It might come from pressure. Perhaps he's said things like, I need you to help me, or you're making it harder, or I can't recover if you keep bringing it up. But guilt is not always telling the truth. Sometimes guilt is simply a sign that you're stepping out of a role you were never meant to carry. You can be kind without being responsible. You can be compassionate without being available for every recovery conversation. You can forgive without removing boundaries. You can want him well without making yourself unwell in the process. Some husbands are tempted to lean rather heavily on their wives, especially at the beginning, because she is the person that they need the most reassurance from. And she's the person that they're going to fear losing. But if he keeps going to you to soothe his shame, he may be asking you to comfort him for the pain he's caused. And that can feel a little upside down. There needs to be space for his remorse, yes, but his remorse cannot become the centre while your wound gets pushed to the side. That's why outside accountability matters so much, not because you're excluded as the wife, but because you shouldn't have to carry the whole weight of your husband's recovery. He needs somewhere appropriate to take the recovery work, and this gives you room to heal. So what does support look like without self-abandonment? What does it look like when you're still hurting? It might be much smaller and calmer and more boundaried than you imagine. Support could sound like, I want you to recover, but I can't be your accountability partner. Or, I'm willing to hear what steps you're taking, but I cannot manage those steps for you. Or, I need you to find proper support away from me. Or, I can acknowledge effort, but I can't reassure you constantly when I'm still trying to feel safe. Or, I care about your healing, but I also need my own healing to matter. Or, I'm not rejecting your recovery, but I am refusing to become responsible for it. Support might mean asking once, what is your plan for accountability? And then allowing your husband to answer with action, not just emotion. Support might mean agreeing to a weekly check-in rather than living in constant daily crisis conversations. Support might mean saying, I can talk about this for half an hour, but then I need to rest. Support might mean saying, I'm too triggered to discuss this tonight. We can return to it tomorrow. Support might mean telling the truth about what helps safety rebuild. For example, I feel safer when you are honest before I ask. I feel safer when you don't minimize or become defensive. I feel safer when you tell me what support you've arranged. I feel safer when you understand that my healing may take time. Support doesn't have to be soft and endlessly available. Sometimes the most loving support is honest boundaries. It may also help to name what support is not. Support is not pretending that you're okay when you're not okay. Support is not protecting him from the consequences of his choices. Support is definitely not becoming sexually available to prove you're forgiving. Support is not allowing him to avoid accountability because he feels ashamed. Support is not accepting secrecy because he says talking about it's too difficult. Support is not letting your pain disappear so his recovery can stay comfortable. Support is not allowing your body, your emotions, your questions, or your triggers to be treated as an inconvenience. Support is not staying silent because you're afraid he will relapse. A husband's recovery that requires his wife's silence is not real recovery. A husband's recovery that collapses every time his wife is hurt is not yet stable recovery. A husband's recovery that depends on his wife's emotional management is not mature recovery. Real recovery learns to face pain without running back to secrecy. So when he says, but I need your support, it can be difficult because sometimes that's genuine. He may be saying, I know I need help. I don't want to keep hiding. I want us to face this. But sometimes, even unintentionally, it can become a little like pressure. I need your support may start to mean, I need you to stop being angry, or I need you to reassure me, or forgive faster, or to stop asking difficult questions, or I need you to make my recovery easier, or to believe me before I'm really rebuilt trust, or I need you to be okay so I don't have to feel so guilty. So it is okay to clarify what support means. You might say, I do want you to recover. What kind of support are you asking me for? That question matters. If he is asking you to encourage him to get help, that may be reasonable. If he's asking you to be his only help, that is not reasonable. If he's asking you to listen sometimes, that may be possible. But if he's asking you to absorb his shame whenever he feels low, that's too much. If he's asking you to recognize constant change over time, that is actually part of rebuilding. But if he's asking you to trust him immediately, that's not support, that's pressure. Support has to be defined. Otherwise, you're going to end up carrying whatever your husband doesn't want to carry himself. So please ask, what do you mean when you say you need my support? Because a husband may think support means, please don't give up on me. But a wife may hear, please carry me. She may already be carrying the shock, the questions, the comparison, the broken trust and the grief. So he needs to be specific and realistic. He can't just hand you the word support and expect you to know what to do with it. And he needs to accept that some forms of support may not be safe for you to offer, especially early on. Your limits are not a lack of love. They may be part of what makes healing possible. One of the most exhausting roles a wife can fall into is policing, checking his phone, checking his history, checking his accounts, watching his mood, watching where his eyes go, watching how long he's in the bathroom, whether he seems distant, whether he's telling the whole truth. Now, we need to be honest. After betrayal, the desire to check makes sense. Trust has been broken. Safety has been shaken. You're trying to protect yourself from being deceived again. So this isn't about shaming you, but long term, you can't live as the police officer in your own marriage. It is going to exhaust your nervous system. It will keep you in a state of threat and make his recovery dependent on your surveillance. And it will create a terrible cycle where he becomes passive and you become hypervigilant. I know this from experience. A healthier approach is for the husband to create transparent structures that don't rely on being caught. That might include appropriate accountability software, agreed openness around devices, regular check-ins with a mentor or recovery group, counselling, pastoral support, or a structured recovery pathway like ours. The important thing is that your husband is proactive, that he's not waiting for you to ask, that he's not irritated that you need safety, that he's not saying, you can check my phone if you want, while making you feel controlling for doing so. He's saying through his actions, I understand that trust was broken. I'm taking responsibility for rebuilding safety. I'm not expecting you to monitor me into maturity. That's very, very different. So what about encouragement? Encouragement can be a beautiful thing, but after betrayal, encouragement can also feel complicated. You might be thinking, why should I praise him for doing what he should have done all along? Or why should I encourage him when nobody's encouraging me? Or why does he get applauded for honesty after years of secrecy? Or why am I expected to be grateful for basic faithfulness? Those questions are understandable. You don't have to throw a celebration because he's begun telling the truth. At the same time, when genuine change becomes consistent, some wives may want to acknowledge it. Not because he is owed applause, not because you're responsible for keeping him motivated, but because truth and change can be named where they are real. There is a difference between encouragement and emotional caretaking. Encouragement might sound like, I noticed that you arranged that accountability meeting yourself. That really does help me feel that you're taking this seriously. Or, I'm still hurting, but I do appreciate that you told me the truth without me having to ask. Or, I'm not ready to fully trust, but I can see that this is different from before. That kind of encouragement doesn't deny your pain, it simply names reality. But you're not obliged to provide encouragement on demand. And your husband shouldn't require your praise in order to keep doing what is right. You need support too. This is vital. The husband needs support for recovery. You need support for betrayal trauma. Both things can be true at the same time, but the wife's support, your support, mustn't be treated as an optional extra. You need somewhere safe to process the shock, the anger, the grief, the body image wounds, spiritual confusion, sexual fear, and broken trust. You're going to need a trusted friend, a counsellor probably, pastoral support most likely, betrayal trauma resources. You're going to need journaling, prayer, rest, space and time. You're going to need to stop managing his feelings long enough to hear your own. And you're going to need to ask, what do I need to feel safe today? What am I carrying that's not mine? What boundaries would help me breathe? Who can support me without minimizing this? What do I need before we talk about intimacy? What do I need to bring into the light with God? Your healing is not selfish. It is not a distraction from his recovery. It's part of the whole picture. Because a marriage cannot truly heal if only your husband's struggle is given language and care. Your wound needs language too. Often the addiction becomes the main character in the marriage. Everything starts revolving around whether your husband is okay, whether he's tempted, whether he's relapsed, whether he is feeling ashamed. And you can disappear in that. And that's why we have to keep saying that your healing matters too. Not after he is better, not once things calm down, but now. Because what happened has affected you too. It's affected you deeply. And if the couple only focus on stopping the behaviour, but never tend to the wound, they may end up with sobriety, but not safety. For Christian wives, the question about faith, forgiveness, and boundaries can feel especially heavy. You may wonder what God expects of you. You may worry that boundaries are unloving. You may feel pressure to forgive quickly. You may fear becoming bitter. You may believe that you should be more gracious or patient and supportive. And yes, Christian marriage does call us to love, but love is not the same as enabling. Forgiveness is not the same as pretending trust has been rebuilt. Grace is not the same as removing accountability. Submission doesn't mean silence in the face of harm. Marriage restoration doesn't mean the wife absorbs all the pain so the husband doesn't have to face it. Jesus is full of grace and truth, not grace without truth, not truth without grace, but both. And in recovery from pornography, both are needed. Grace says, you're not beyond redemption. Truth says, this caused real damage. Grace says healing is possible. Truth says healing requires honesty, repentance, and change. Grace says shame doesn't have to have the final word. Truth says secrecy cannot continue. Grace says God can restore. Truth says restoration isn't the same as rushing. So if you're trying to support your husband while you're still hurting, you do not need to choose between being Christian and having boundaries. Healthy boundaries may be part of the truth that makes real grace possible. Here are some examples of practical boundaries that might help you support without self-abandoning. You might say, I'm willing to have a recovery conversation, but not late at night when I'm exhausted. Or I need you to have accountability. Or I'm not ready for sexual intimacy while I still feel like this. Or I don't want graphic details, but I do need honest answers to the questions that affect my safety. I need you to tell me if you relapse rather than waiting for me to discover it. I need you to stop minimizing by saying it was only porn. I need space when I'm triggered, and I need you to not punish me for needing that space. I cannot be the person you come to every time you feel shame. You need another safe person to support that. I'm willing to notice change, but I'm not willing to pretend trust is rebuilt before it is. I want healing for us both, but I won't carry this alone. Now, those aren't punishments, they're clarity, and clarity helps both people know what's safe, what's not safe, and what needs change. So if you're the husband listening and you want your wife's support, one of the best things you can do is become easier to support safely. That means you don't make her drag the truth out of you. You don't become defensive when she's triggered, and she will be. You don't collapse into shame, so she has to comfort you. You don't expect her to trust words that have not yet been supported by time. You don't pressure her sexually as proof of forgiveness. You don't make her responsible for finding your help. You don't treat her questions as attacks when they're often attempts to find safety. You don't say, I'm trying, while refusing structure, accountability, or honesty. Instead, you can say, I'm taking responsibility for my recovery. I have arranged support. I want you to have support too. I understand that you're still hurting. I will not rush you. I know trust will take time. I will answer honestly. I am sorry for the ways this has affected how you see yourself, me, and our marriage. I'm committed to change whether or not you're able to encourage me today. That is the kind of posture that may, over time, make support feel safer for her to offer. I think that phrase, become easier to support safely, is really important because sometimes the husband wants the support, but his behaviour may still feel unsafe. He may still be defensive or vague, passive, or easily overwhelmed by shame. And then you're expected to support him while also protecting yourself from him emotionally. That's exhausting. So one of the kindest things a husband can do is to take responsibility clearly enough so that you're not constantly wondering whether he really means it. Consistency then becomes its own form of reassurance. Now, there may be seasons when you simply cannot support your husband very much. The wound may be too raw, the deception may be too recent. There may have been too many relapses, and you feel emotionally unsafe. You may be dealing with trauma, children, work, health, the menopause, finances, or years of exhaustion. And in that case, your support may be limited to something very basic. I want you to get help, but I don't have the capacity to be part of the process right now. That's okay. That might be the truth. And that truth is better than forced support that turns into resentment, collapse, or emotional burnout. Because believe me, if you're doing it all and you're putting in the support that you don't have the capacity to give, you will end up feeling that resentment. You will end up collapsing. You will have the emotional burnout. There is a difference between refusing to support recovery and recognizing that you are too wounded to carry close involvement in it. A husband who's serious about recovery will still pursue help. He may grieve that you're not able to be more involved, but he won't use it as an excuse to stop, because his recovery cannot depend on your emotional capacity. It must be rooted in his own repentance, responsibility, and desire to change. For couples who are ready for some structured communication, a simple check-in may help. It's not for the earliest crisis stage if things are too raw or too unsafe. But when both of you are able, you might agree to a weekly check-in with a clear beginning and an end. The husband might answer things like, what recovery steps have I taken this week? Where have I been honest? Where have I struggled? What support have I accessed outside of you? What am I doing to rebuild safety? And the wife, you might answer, what has helped me feel safer this week? What has helped me feel less safe? What do I need you to understand about my healing? What boundary or reassurance would help me this week? The purpose isn't to interrogate. The purpose is to create communication and a rhythm of truth. But it only works if the husband comes prepared. The wife shouldn't have to lead the entire conversation, ask every question, manage every emotion, and then comfort him afterwards. A check-in should reduce chaos, not create more of it. This is why we created the Hope After pathway, because couples often need more than scattered conversations, emotional apologies, and desperate promises. They need structure. They need language. They need somewhere safe to put the pain. They need to understand that the wife's wound and the husband's recovery both matter, but they're not the same thing. The Hope After pathway walks through 6 stages, from the moment everything changed through to long-term recovery. It's not about making the wife responsible for her husband's recovery. It's not about excusing pornography or rushing forgiveness or forcing intimacy before safety has been rebuilt. It's a structured process for couples who want to face the reality of what has happened and begin walking forward with honesty, faith, and care. So, how do you support your husband with his porn addiction when you're still hurting? The answer is carefully, honestly, with boundaries, without self-abandonment. You can want him to recover without becoming responsible for his recovery. You can care about his freedom without silencing your wound. You can encourage honesty without becoming the police. You can show compassion without absorbing his shame. You can forgive in time and with God's help without pretending trust has already been rebuilt. And you can say, my healing matters too, because it does. His recovery matters, your healing matters, your marriage matters. But a marriage cannot be restored by asking the wounded person to disappear. Healing begins when truth is told, responsibility is taken, support is shared appropriately, and both people are allowed to face what pornography has done. Thank you for listening to Hope After. If this episode has spoken to where you are, you can find out more about the Hope After pathway through the link in the show notes. Take this gently. You're not failing because it's hard. You're not unloving because you need boundaries. You're not responsible for carrying his recovery. And even here, in this complicated, painful place, hope can begin again.